Previously on Narva 1944 we saw how the Soviet Krasnoye Selo-Ropshar offensive finally broke the siege of Leningrad. At the same time, the 2nd Shock Army broke out of the Oranienbaum pocket and the 3rd SS Panzer Corps was forced to defend the line running at an odd angle. Finally, it was decided that the withdrawal to the Luga River line was necessary in order to prevent the entire corps from being outflanked. On the 27th of January, the retreat was in full swing. In the northern sector, the Norwegian and German troops of the Norge Regiment retreated over the corduroy roads. These are roads which were constructed out of logs to tackle the inevitable bog and slush. The Red Army quickly became apparent of the withdrawal and they quickly set about pursuing the retreating Norge Regiment. During the general retreat, SS Brigadeführer von Scholz became severed with his headquarters from the rest of his Nordlands division. However, a prompt counterattack by a Norge company was able to set the headquarters free. The Norge Regiment retreated further back through Kirovo and finally to Begunici. The 3rd Battalion of the Denmark Regiment marched back towards Kerstovo. Panzers were used to full effect in order to protect the retreating infantry. The Tiger 1s of the Schwere Panzerabteilung 502 remained at Volosovo in order to hold back any Soviet armoured assault. This critical southern sector was also defended by the depleted SS Aufklärungsabteilung 11. The SS Panzerabteilung 11 Hermann von Salza of the Nordlands division was ordered to move towards the front lines to facilitate a retreat of the infantry. At Koporie they ran into the Red Army positions. The Soviet armour destroyed 3 of the battalion's tanks, including the Panzer of the 1st Company's commander SS Hauptsturmführer Holtkamp. Holtkamp was killed inside his tank. The 4th SS Sturmbrigade Nederland and the Kampfgruppe Küste only began their retreat the next day, the 28th of January. This mostly because both units were in the most quiet sector of the corps. The front was nearly endangered after contradicting orders, but SS Brigadeführer Kriesing eventually followed Steiner's orders and commenced a retreat of his Kampfgruppe Küste. They retreated from Velikino to Ostrov. As of the 28th, the entirety of Steiner's Dritte SS Panzer Corps was moving westward, but with the Soviet soldiers right on their heels it proved to be a difficult fighting withdrawal. The 2nd Battalion of the Denmark Regiment under the command of SS Sturmbannführer Neergaard Jacobsen clashed with determined Soviet forces at Kerstovo. His battalion nearly became surrounded, but they managed to pull out of the dangerous situation just in time. The 3rd Battalion of the SS Artillerieregiment 11 were also in a precarious situation at Racino, where they had taken up blocking positions. When they were ordered to pull back, they bumped upon a Soviet convoy. One of the batteries was completely destroyed and several of the artillery guns had to be left behind so that the infantry could slip away to their friendly lines. During the night, the Soviet army managed to grab a hold of Gurlyovo, a hamlet in the south of the line. With its new Red Army occupants, the entirety of the southern German flank was in danger. The town had to be recaptured. For this, the Denmark made available its 7th Company and its motorcycle platoon. 2 assault guns of the SS Anti-Tank Battalion 11 were also made available for the task. As dusk fell over the snowy battlefields, the German counterattack commenced. After initial setbacks, they eventually managed to encircle the hamlet, laying any potential danger to the southern flank aside. By the afternoon of the cold 29th of January, the majority of the Nordlands division was still dangerously east as their withdrawal routes had been severed at several locations by the increasing number of Soviet troops. The only option for the Germans, Norwegians and Danes was to fight away westward. The 3rd Battalion Norge Regiment held on to Opolje until nightfall. The battalion led by SS Sturmbannführer Lohmann fought a vigorous battle against the attacking Soviet troops. The aiding SS Anti-Tank Battalion 11 lost its commander during the fight. The Soviets gained the upper hand, and after the very bloody fighting, the Norge Battalion and the members of the Anti-Tank Battalion were forced to retreat. By nightfall, a few of the 3rd SS Panzer Corps units had reached their destination, the Luga River line. The key to the northern sector of the Luga River line was the city called Jamburg, present-day Kingisepp. It was around that city that SS Artillery Regiment 11 took up their new fighting positions. To the east of the city, the Norge Regiment slowly but surely started to set up its bridgehead across the river inside the village. Cutting back on the western bank were the remnants of the 1st Battalion Norge and some Wehrmacht forces who had retreated from the Leningrad front. To the north of Jamburg, at a town called Pagoda, the Denmark Regiment started to set up its defences. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the Danish Regiment were positioned along the railway lines running from Kotlioto to Juchkoma. More up north were the members of the Kampfgruppe Küste and the Sturmbrigade Nederland. Both fighting formations were in their second day of the withdrawal, but because of the bad conditions due to the thick snow, the withdrawal went slower than expected. Because of this, the Soviets were able to catch up with them. Fortunately for the Nederland Brigade, the Soviets preferred to bomb them rather than go to an infantry assault. Just as the brigade headquarters were starting to withdraw from their positions at Luzisty, their headquarter buildings were set on fire by the increasing Soviet artillery. For the assault guns of the Nederland Brigade, it proved to be a very difficult withdrawal as well, as they were turned down on several places to cross the Luga. They were forced to march down south towards the bridges at Jamburg, where they eventually crossed the waterway. In the area of Kotli, the infantry of the Nederland Brigade became more or less entrapped, and although the 48th General Seyffardt and the majority of the 49th De Ruyter regiments managed to escape without any real troubles, the story was far from equal for the men of the 2nd Battalion of the De Ruyter. Under the command of SS Hauptsturmführer Ertel, the Dutchmen were forced to charge across an open plain to break the encirclement. Fortunately for the retreating Dutchmen and Germans, the Soviets gave way with relative ease, and so the 2nd Battalion De Ruyter was back on track towards the Luga River. The Sturmbrigade Nederland and the Kampfgruppe Küste finally reached Caecino with the Soviet 2nd Shock Army right on their heels. Both units were quickly thrown into the defensive lines to halt the oncoming Soviets. On the 30th of January, members of the SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 48th General Seyffardt were the last of the Dutch brigades to reach the river line. They were immediately put into positions on the northern sector of Caecino. Later that day, engineers blew up the bridges over the Luga around the town. The defensive line had formed, and the corps with mixed nationalities were once again ready to receive the attackers. Feldmarschall Walter Model, the new commander of Army Group North, wanted to build a new front line behind the Luga River. Felix Scheiner, on the other hand, deemed that thought unwise, as the Soviet 8th Army had already crossed a river to the south. Instead, Scheiner proposed to pull his forces back towards the hills north and south of Lake Peipus, which to the north created a funnel, making it easier to defend as there were less possibilities for an attacking force to outflank the defenders. Steiner was lower in rank and his thought was put aside. However, the next day, on the 31st of January, the Soviets were already able to breach the northern Luga River defences, as they made a breakthrough between Hungerburg and Kurowice. This sector was deemed impenetrable by the Germans because of the extremely thick wilderness. The Soviets, however, had other thoughts and managed to cross the river in numbers, and they quickly dealt with the inexperienced defenders in that sector. The perilous situation was only reported to Steiner's headquarters the next day, February 1st, 1944. On the 31st of January, the Soviets did not only attack between Hungerburg and Kurowice. The bridgehead at Jamburg was also due to heavy fighting. The defending Norge Regiment bore the brunt of the assault, which rapidly spread to the neighbouring sector at Padoga, which was defended by the Denmark Regiment. After 2 hours of incessant fighting, the line of the Denmark was starting to show its cracks. The 5th Company of the Danish Regiment, which was in reserve, was brought up to counterattack. Although the counterattack was only partially successful, the company endured incredible losses. SS Obersturmführer Seebach, the company commander, remained at his post, leading his men despite being wounded himself. For his actions during the retreat towards the Luga and on the Luga itself, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. The following day, February 1st, the same day that Steiner became aware of the perilous situation between Hungerburg and Kurowice, the Soviets renewed their attacks on the battered positions of the 3rd SS Panzer Corps. The brunt of the attack was borne by SS Sturmbannführer Neergaard Jacobsen's 2nd Battalion Denmark Regiment, and 2 of his companies had to give way under the increasing Soviet pressure. In a counterattack, the Germans and Danes were able to stem the Soviet advance, but as Neergaard Jacobsen became wounded, he ordered his units to retreat. At Jamburg, the Norge Regiment also had to give way to the Soviet 109th Rifle Corps. Company by company, they retreated back across the Luga. By the end of the day, the defenders had to give up Jamburg. The final bridges across the Luga River were blown, as the 109th Rifle Corps had successfully captured the village. With the Luga River line breached, there was once again the possibility that Steiner's 3rd SS Panzer Corps would become surrounded. There was no other option but to abandon the Luga River line defences and retreat towards the next defensive line at the Narva River. The infantry units of the Nordlands Division, the Norge and the Denmark regiments, leapfrogged over each other during the subsequent retreat. The last battalion to pull back was the Norge Regiment's 3rd Battalion, which endured several Soviet attacks. The battalion took heavy casualties before finally being able to withdraw. The commanding officer, SS Sturmbannführer Lohmann, was wounded during the battle. Just like at the Luga River, the artillery units were the first to arrive at the Narva. The Narva River line had temporarily been occupied by the men of Kampfgruppe Küster, who under the orders of Steiner had begun to set up the defences. By the 1st and 2nd of February 1944, the first units of the 3rd SS Panzer Corps arrived in the area. As the depleted units of many German divisions which had to retreat from the Leningrad front were being reorganized in repositions to man the new defensive line, the men of the Nordland Division and the Nederland Brigade were given the important task of defending the Narva bridgehead just east of the city of Narva. When the depleted battalions of the 3rd SS Panzer Corps arrived at the Narva River line, they were astounded to see that the fortifications they were promised weren't there. Nonetheless, they dug in and prepared their own defences. The city of Narva was strategically extremely important. Throughout history there were already many battles for the city. Castle Hermannsburg on the western bank and Castle Ivangorod on the eastern bank of the river Narva was clear proof to the soldiers that the city had had a long history of war. In 1944, Narva would again be the scene of heavy fighting. The city is located along the river bearing the same name, and to the north and south of Narva were swamps and thick forests. Moreover, to the south of the city is Lake Peipus. This made large-scale attacks, the strength of the Soviet thrust, nearly impossible. The fighting had to be done in narrow strips through thick forests and over large swamps. The defenders clearly had an advantage. For the defense of Estonia, the German army had another ace up its sleeves. In their ranks they had the 20th Estonian SS Division. This division largely consisted out of Estonian volunteers who would be fighting on the home ground, and they weren't going to give the Soviet attackers an inch of ground without fighting for it. In order to break the Narva front, the Soviets had made ready 3 armies. These were the 47th Army, the 2nd Shock Army and the 8th Army. These Red Army soldiers would be up against a mixed group from all branches of the German army. All the way up north at Hungerburg were the members of Kampfgruppe Küster. To their right were 3 battle groups which had been set up as the retreat developed. These consisted out of displaced soldiers from various infantry divisions and the SS Engineer Battalion 54 Nederland. The Narva bridgehead itself was defended by the 3rd SS Panzer Corps, reinforced by various members of the 61st, 225th and 170th Infantry Divisions. By the 2nd of February, the 4th Soviet Rifle Regiment had managed to breach the Narva River. They even managed to cross the frozen river and establish a bridgehead. At the same time, the Soviets continued to put pressure onto the Germans, who were by then in their new defences. To the south of Narva, the 122nd Soviet Rifle Corps crossed the Narva River, establishing the Krivaso bridgehead. But more on that in future episodes. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and do leave a comment down below. Cheers!